Hi, everyone, and welcome to Facebook Live. I'm really excited to be here with the stars and the producers of a new Facebook Watch show called Sorry for Your Loss, which premiered on Tuesday. It's about a young woman, Lee Shaw, and her grief at suddenly losing her husband. And it was an official Toronto International Film Festival selection. I'm here with Elizabeth Olsen, who's an award-winning film actress, has never done TV before, so this is her first TV series, but she's the star and the executive producer of the show. And James Ponsalt, who's an award-winning director and executive producer. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us
To talk about this. So we're not going to give too much away because we know it just happened on Tuesday, but this is a very powerful series which really hits home for me. When I lost my husband suddenly, I really experienced a lot of the things that your character does. The shock, the anger, the sadness, and eventually the moments of joy and humor. So I want to start with, what was your inspiration for Lee? James, when you were shaping her character, what were you thinking about? And Elizabeth, how do you feel about playing her and preparing to play this role?
It really began with Steinkellner's script, and the character of Lee was so well shaped there. But then working with Lizzie, who was really a partner, a collaborator, I think. We led with her intelligence and her sort of, allergy to sentimentality, and she's a fierce sort of searcher for honesty.
Are you talking about me or Lee? Talking about Lee.
Yeah. Lee.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it started about 3 years ago, so there's been a lot of changes and shifts that I've experienced on the parallel. And I've never experienced a loss like that yet in my life. Luckily, I still have my parents and my closest friends and closest siblings. But the idea of starting a life all over again because of a different kind of loss was something I connected to 3 years ago. And then as we created what would be the show, and it was ongoing conversations with people who were a part of it from the beginning, whose best friend was a grief counselor, lost both her parents in the same year. And it was just a constant conversation of people just voluntarily speaking about the biggest losses in their life. And then it was Joan Didion's Year of Magical Thinking. I read that a few times over. I think it's a very articulate, visual, emotional experience as a reader. And she really allows you to get into the character of her own mind and to really understand what that experience was. And it was this thing that opened up everyone we worked with and communicated with about the project and the process. Everyone was sharing. I mean, you have so many personal experiences that kept blowing my mind, and it was first time people are honestly communicating about something that's so difficult to talk about.
And I think that's one of the beautiful things about the show. When I wrote my book, one of the things I experienced was, trying to kick the elephant out of the room. And one of the things I thought was so powerful about the first episode is, you can see Lee have entire conversations with people who will never bring up her husband, which when you're watching in the show, you're like, that can't happen. But trust me, as you know, it happens. It happened to me over and over and over again. And so I think this show does kick a very big elephant out of a lot of rooms and show people that. What have you learned through this about how to help other people through hardship? Because I know so many people watching today are, hopefully, some have gone through loss, some haven't.
Yeah.
But I think everyone wants to be there for the people near them who need help, but it's so hard to know how.
That is the thing that I learned. I analyzed my relationship with certain people in my family who did lose their father. And I reanalyzed, because I was 17 when it happened, and I was going through all the years of how I was scared to bring it up. I was scared to communicate about it. And then it was it was the end of last year where I realized maybe I should just start talking with them and bringing up the conversation, because I was avoiding it because I was thinking, oh, maybe this is too difficult. Maybe they don't want to talk about it.
Maybe I'll remind them.
Yeah, maybe I'll remind them about something sad.
Yeah.
But once I did that, it became there was no elephant in the room, like what you're saying. Now it's become part of normal conversation for the last 6 months. And that that is, I think, the thing that I didn't know because I wasn't on the other side of it.
And I think, I mean, grief can be isolating, right? And no one teaches you. We're not taught in school how to grieve. There's no natural or unnatural way to grieve. We're all sort of making it up as we go along. If people have religion, maybe there's some structure in place. But I think people sometimes they feel like maybe they're gonna upset you, or that grief is contagious. Maybe I shouldn't talk about it. And I think for me, I've just learned that it's always better to just ask them anything, treat them as a normal person, because it could be you.
And it is, I mean, I remember for me, if someone was going through something hard, they had a loss, they had cancer, I would say something once. I'm so sorry for your loss, or, oh, I'm so sorry you're not feeling well. And then I would never bring it up again because I was afraid to remind them. Mm-hmm. You can't remind me I lost my husband. If you walk up to me today, 3.5 years later, and say, I'm so sorry about Dave, I don't think, oh, I forgot. How dare you remind me?
Yeah.
I think thank you, because I live with it every day, and I think we forget that, right? And then it goes to the topic of resilience. So one of the things that helped me was my friend Adam Grant, who I eventually wrote Option B with, told me that I wasn't born with a fixed amount of resilience. I said to him, how much do I have? He said, that's the wrong question. The question is, how much are you going to build? And it's like a muscle. Mm-hmm. And so as you think about the show, how do you think about helping people build resilience through this show? Because I think that's so clearly what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're trying to be a catalyst for a conversation. This is not a show about death. It is a show about life, about family, about sort of the ways that we heal. We have we had an advisor on the show, a guy named Dr. Scott Irwin, who's a professor of psychiatry, and he said sort of one of the models for grief that he really found the most comforting and true is that when someone passes away, whether it was a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, you don't stop being in relationship with them. You will always be in some kind of relationship with them. And you just have to own that, and the relationship will evolve as your life changes.
I so agree with this. I remember once I was at, dinner party with couples, and I, wasn't part of a couple, obviously, right? My husband had just died, but everyone was going around and telling the story of how they met. And no one would ask me that. Because asking a widow, like, how did you meet your husband? And I realized, oh my God, no one's ever going to ask me that again. But I still...
You want to tell the story.
Yeah, it's still my story of meeting Dave, and it's still special for me and precious for me. And so I now ask widows that story because I know exactly what you're saying, or widowers, that, if that's even a word anymore. I don't even know if that's a word anymore. But I still ask people because they are still in a relationship. So one of the other things I think you're doing so well on the show is humor. So we all know there's jokes told at funerals. Mm-hmm. I made jokes about Dave early, actually. Well, he should have stuck around. And if he cared about that, he should have stuck around. And people are always shocked. Yeah. But humor, I learned through the writing process of Option B and the research, is so powerful. And I understand now why people make jokes at funerals, because humor is a powerful way to release tension. Mm-hmm. You've done this well in the show. Okay. How is it for you to do those moments of humor?
I think some of it's in the script, and some of it you find in the interaction between the actors you get to know, and it's something playful, and it's something that James always says when we're in the editing room. If it creates a moment of joy and laughter, it's staying in. Like if we're able to find something that makes us chuckle and makes us feel good, that's what we need, because that was always the goal, is to find the humor, and you'll never laugh harder or cry harder than you will at a funeral, in remembrance. And so that was always a goal for us.
That's great. And I think it's so important. So one of the things that happens in the show is that her path is a lot about the other relationships in her life. And it's interesting to hear you talk, because you're talking about all of these relationships in your life, and it's pretty clear that you're bringing that into the show. Why are all of those relationships so important here in this character development?
I mean, I think for Lee, it's sort of how, it's how she sort of copes. I mean, she I think, her relationship with her sister, with her mother, with her brother-in-law, relationships that were healthy, relationships that had that were fragile, or had, there was pain. It was sort of, there's a sense of community that's sort of engendered, and they're all sort of going through a common experience of they're all amateurs in grief, all kind of making it up as they move forward.
So after I lost Dave, I learned about, through Adam, a concept called post-traumatic growth. And I ask audiences this, who's heard of post-traumatic stress, or PTSD? Every hand goes up. Yeah. And then you say, who's heard of post-traumatic growth, meaning the growth you experience after trauma? not that you would trade it, but the things that actually are better or deeper or more fulfilling in your life. And the numbers are less than 15% of people experience post-traumatic stress, but more than half of people will experience post-traumatic growth. And so it's something that I really, and so I think whether or not you knew the term, you're showing that in your show. Because there are ways Lee is growing and stronger and better because of the trauma she experienced.
Well, the thing that's the image that I always think about when thinking about this show is that everyone carries a certain backpack with them, and it contains all the traumatic experiences they've had, all the pain, whatever it is, and they've learned how to walk through life with that backpack just because it's there. It makes them who they are. And then a crazy shift can happen, and something all of a sudden will change that weight and make it so much heavier. And you can't get rid of the weight. You just have to adjust how you are walking through life. And you will then see the rest of the world with that new weight on your shoulders because you're able to handle it now. Like, you'll be able to get used to it and walk through life again. And I always think about that because that is growth, that's resilience, that's perseverance. And
no, that's exactly right. So one of the many reasons we're so glad to have this show for Facebook Watch is because the whole idea of Watch is content with community at its core, that bring people together to have conversations or support each other or be part of people's lives. So there are a lot of Option B groups, and those groups have formed. There's a grief and loss group that I'm part of. There are other groups that people have formed and come together. There's a Sorry for Your Loss Facebook group, which already has a lot of people discussing their experiences. And the Option B group, having no connection to this, is having conversations around Sorry for Your Loss too, organically. So what is it like to work on a show that has community at its core? How do you feel about incorporating that into, as you develop the show?
I think it's incredible, and it feels really organic because for myself, I mean, I've found out about a lot of friends' deaths or sort of memorial services, things like that, through Facebook. And then to see what people have shared sort of along our show's page, like personal stories, about someone who died a month ago or 10 years ago, and just wanting to share it with people and other people sort of coming to comfort them or just share their own stories, to feel that we're a catalyst for a conversation where people can feel less alone. It makes me, it's very humbling and grateful.
That's great. All right, last question for both of you. What's the one thing you hope people take away from the series?
I hope the thing that I always want to get out of any work that I do is that it stimulates a conversation, that it actually makes someone want to talk about it afterwards. And it's the same, it's tied into this idea of having a community where the show is streaming, and the fact that you can actually see the conversation, and it is helping people feel not alone, just in the same way social networks make people feel connected if they feel isolated in their hometown or if they feel isolated in the school they're in, and that they can find someone like them on a different social network. I think that's the true good positive experience of why it was created. And the fact that this show is stimulating conversation and it's making people hopefully feel less isolated, I think that is a big goal.
I think for me, if someone watching the show has lost someone and they feel alone, they don't know sort of what to do. Whatever they're feeling is okay. That the emotions you're feeling are mentionable, should be talked about, they're manageable, and that we're all resilient and stronger than we think.
It's a great message. Well, thank you both for creating something that's really meaningful to me and a lot of people. And thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.